Removal bans have been scheduled. School enrollment is reportedly complete. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are returning to the United Kingdom permanently by the end of this month. The couple informed King Charles by telephone on Sunday. A country rarely achieves consensus within hours. Wednesday night produced exactly that. The news landed close to 22,000. By midnight, polling and commentary across multiple platforms reflected near uniform opposition. The speed of the response, not simply its direction, warrants examination. The opposition was not confined to one political faction or demographic segment. Piers Morgan floated the possibility of relocating himself. Meghan responded that America had completed its hosting duties. Meghan McCain stated flatly that fated royalty held no interest domestically, and Britain was welcome to reclaim the situation. Lee Cohen required one word for his assessment: Armageddon. None of these figures coordinated. When an entire nation's commentary apparatus independently reaches similar conclusions within the same time window, the reaction reflects something tangible beneath it. Polling conducted that evening confirmed the pattern. Approximately 9 in 10 respondents opposed the return when asked directly. The response was not hesitant. Beneath thousands of comments spanning every conceivable position, one phrase appeared with notable consistency across unconnected accounts: William, stand strong. The couple spent 6 years stating that Britain had broken the Duchess, that the press nearly killed her, that the country carried something fundamentally rotten, requiring an ocean's distance to escape. The narrative supported the book arrangement, the streaming series, multiple interviews. Returning voluntarily to reside among the population described in those terms generates an obvious contradiction. That contradiction landed across breakfast tables Thursday morning as disbelief rather than inquiry. Peter Hunt covered the royal family for the BBC across a career that taught him measurable restraint. Colleagues describe him as someone who selects language with deliberation before broadcast. His prediction of Prince William's private reaction used a word that carries weight when deployed by a source of his experience: apoplectic. He followed with an observation that should concern every palace advisor. This arrangement creates the tangible possibility of two competing royal operations functioning simultaneously: Prince William's household and Prince Harry's, both technically loyal to one crown that cannot hold two centers of gravity without structural failure. Tom Sykes termed it a direct insult to Prince William. He posed the procedural question palace staff cannot answer satisfactorily. What mechanism governs the first occasion King Charles invites Prince Harry to Christmas dinner, or the first time Prince Harry elects to attend Remembrance Sunday? Sykes concluded with a line widely repeated since: no version of this situation would have survived a single afternoon under the late Queen's supervision. Those familiar with her operational methods understand that assessment as factual rather than rhetorical. Robert Jobson reports from within sufficient proximity to palace sourcing that his commentary carries different weight than most public analysis. His description, a divided crown, the worst rupture inside this family in 90 years. He reached back to the abdication for a historical comparison. That reference is not deployed casually. It represents the single most serious constitutional crisis this monarchy has survived within living memory. That a veteran royal correspondent reached for it without apparent hesitation merits attention. Word from inside Prince William's household indicates the team has not forgotten the aftermath of the Oprah interview, the online abuse, the threats directed at the Princess of Wales during a period when she was, by most accounts, managing more privately than the public understood. What is reportedly relocating to their county is not simply a relative. It is the entire operational pattern that accompanies this specific couple wherever they establish residence. Comment sections that night did not read as gossip. They read as preparation for impact. One termed the pair dangerous to Prince William's family directly. Another called for additional security posted before morning. Beneath nearly every clip, the same 3 words climbed back to prominence: William, stand strong. Which presents a question nobody in the family wishes to answer with full candor. Does Prince William bring 3 children into Sandringham if this specific couple occupies seats at the table? Almost certainly not. He takes his family to the Middletons quietly and permits the palace to explain the absence however it chooses. Consider the actual architecture of what is unfolding, laid out without diplomatic softening. A man who departed royal duty entirely described it as imprisonment on international television before millions of viewers, then constructed a commercial enterprise from exposing the family who raised him, has apparently relocated adjacent to the one brother who remained, who absorbed the responsibilities. Prince Harry departed without advance notice between siblings. A term sufficiently precise for that combination of timing and nerve does not exist in standard vocabulary. The outlets exercising greater caution have largely avoided stating this directly. The finances are reportedly deteriorating faster than anyone connected to the couple will confirm publicly. The marriage, by multiple accounts circulating through royal reporting networks, occupies considerably more precarious ground than public presentations suggest. The Duchess herself reportedly was not advocating for this relocation. Quite the opposite. According to multiple accounts, provided current reporting withstands scrutiny in coming weeks, 6 consecutive years of insisting she could never safely return too dangerous a country, too cruel an environment for raising children. She is reportedly boarding a flight before month's end, packing the carefully maintained argument alongside her belongings. Consider what happens to her actual commercial product when she lands on British soil. Everything about the brand, the lifestyle content, the cooking program format, the entire identity constructed in recent years, operates specifically on being unmistakably Californian in aesthetic and presentation. Sunshine, open kitchens, gardens photographed at optimal lighting, edible flowers distributed across every visible surface. That is not incidental branding. That constitutes the entire commercial proposition. How does a Californian aesthetic survive transplantation into an English county when the premise depends fundamentally on being distinctly American? Realistically, that specific brand identity does not survive customs intact. This registers as a particularly difficult reversal for her specifically. Every value marketed for 6 years independence, self-made achievement, an entrepreneur too substantial for institutional containment, now apparently translates to operating a preserves business from rented property in England. America cooling toward her represents one circumstance. America is vast enough to permit disappearance. Britain is not constructed that way. It is a smaller country with a longer institutional memory and considerably denser camera coverage per square mile. One of their remaining public defenders appeared on television that same evening and delivered what may rank among the least effective crisis management performances across this entire 6-year period. She told viewers with apparent sincerity that the Duke and Duchess represent authentic, profound love. Then, without prompting from the host, pivoted directly into suggesting Prince and Princess of Wales's relationship was somehow different, somehow lesser by comparison. The host was compelled to interrupt mid-sentence to confirm on air that yes, the Prince and Princess of Wales are in fact very much in love themselves. That represents approximately the caliber of advocacy still operating in their corner when circumstances require it. The king reportedly learned of this development by telephone on a Sunday. The head of state received notification his son was relocating a family permanently into the country, in roughly the manner one learns a parcel delivery has been rescheduled without notice. Several days advance notification, nothing more substantial despite the constitutional position he occupies. No advance consultation, no substantive discussion beforehand. Robert Jobson, who has tracked this family across 3 decades, did not soften his description of what reportedly occurred when the Duke and Duchess met with King Charles in July. They arrived with a decision already finalized, he stated. The children are coming. More visits with grandfather follow. The phrase Jobson deployed, holding a gun to the king's head. His assessment of King Charles permitting it stood at 4 words. The king made a mistake. The palace's official statement language about His Majesty welcoming additional time with family in a private capacity reads considerably thinner once examined closely. That is not phrasing describing genuine paternal enthusiasm. That is language drafted for someone handed a decision he could not refuse, attempting to present it as chosen. This represents institutional weakness, stated without diplomatic cushioning, and someone must eventually articulate it directly rather than maneuvering carefully around the obvious conclusion. King Charles appears, by every available account, an entirely decent, fundamentally kind man. He also apparently lacks the capacity to establish a firm, enduring boundary with his younger son when circumstances require it, and the remainder of his family absorbs the practical consequences of that specific gap repeatedly year after year, decision after decision. What should have occurred was entirely straightforward, and a substantial portion of the country articulated exactly that by Thursday afternoon in comment sections and call-in programs alike. A public statement addressing the situation directly, consequences that actually hold rather than dissolving after a news cycle. Titles formally, permanently removed rather than left in ambiguous suspension. None of that occurred. It has not occurred across approximately 6 years of comparable opportunities to establish a firmer line. The aspect deserving genuine scrutiny is not really about Prince Harry once examined closely. Coverage continues framing this as simply a father loving his son excessively to refuse him, as though that constitutes the complete narrative, the worst criticism one could level at King Charles. That framing omits something considerably more consequential. King Charles is not solely navigating fatherhood. He bears responsibility for an entire institution's stability. This decision involved only two sets of considerations genuinely worth weighing against each other. The second belongs to the son who remained. Prince William reportedly was not consulted whatsoever. He was informed after arrangements were already concluded. Whatever King Charles believes he has secured through this decision, he spent his heir's patience to acquire it, and that reserve was never unlimited. Jobson stated plainly what everyone proximate to the palace already privately accepts. Eventually, Prince Harry gets reintegrated into the institution in some capacity, formally or otherwise. Because the alternative is losing narrative control entirely, which may well represent precisely the outcome Prince Harry has been engineering from the beginning. Why does this specific timing function? Strip away every alternative explanation and one candid answer remains. They have exhausted the material. Every grievance already published, every accusation already aired, every willing family member already featured across some documentary or interview. Consider that carefully because it explains nearly everything following. 6 years operating on a single product, the family itself monetized from every conceivable angle. That is what Netflix purchased. That is what publishers purchased. That is the entire foundation beneath every interview granted. Nothing else has ever occupied that particular commercial space. The inventory has run empty. You can only monetize the same family history once before the audience registers the repetition. Expect another book eventually. That is close to guaranteed. Allow a year, perhaps two, and coverage will return to discussing another interview, another purportedly revealing detail about cosmetics or garden party illumination reframed as evidence of something darker underneath. The underlying business model has collapsed, and no remaining revenue exists in that specific narrative, which means proximity to the actual institution becomes the new commercial product, not formal reinstatement, simply sufficient visible closeness that it reads as legitimate from distance. That specific impression cannot be constructed from 5,000 kilometers away. The financial picture beneath this reads properly difficult. Word from inside Netflix suggests considerable internal fatigue with the entire arrangement. Prince Harry's speaking fees, once quoted around $1 million per appearance in 2020, have reportedly declined to a fraction of that figure for recent bookings. The lifestyle brand is not struggling. By most current indicators, it is essentially concluded. The single prediction that actually proved unsettling came from Jobson, and the clip warranted replay twice to confirm accuracy. Expect a carefully orchestrated moment. A friendly photographer. The Duchess photographed with local children and a composition previously deployed by someone else in this family. Deliberately or otherwise, expect cousin photographs as well, arranged for maximum visual warmth. That is reportedly the actual currency now. Their team is apparently briefing American press outlets in careful background conversations that this entire relocation centers primarily on the king's declining health. One would prefer that explanation to hold up completely on its own merits without requiring further examination. The health situation likely factors into the timing somewhere realistically, but treating it as the complete picture requires ignoring an established recurring pattern stretching back years. When Prince Philip was hospitalized, they were reportedly recording interview segments with Oprah simultaneously. When the late Queen's health was visibly declining during her final months, they were reportedly filming Netflix content in parallel. Skepticism here is not remotely unreasonable given that documented track record. It has been earned repeatedly through their own past conduct. A detail has gone almost entirely uncovered elsewhere, and it may honestly constitute the single most revealing thread running through this entire development. Two separate national newspapers published essentially identical coverage on the exact same night within the exact same hour, matching quotes, matching phrasing throughout nearly every paragraph. Both outlets independently labeled their version an exclusive. That is not independent journalism operating in coincidental parallel. That is a single source distributing identical material to multiple selected recipients simultaneously, then permitting each to claim individual ownership afterward. Terming something exclusive loses meaning entirely when two competing papers publish it together, word for word. That is a coordinated release with separate bylines attached. Subsequently, nobody broke this story. Someone distributed it deliberately to a pre-selected list, and Jobson supplied the detail completing the picture. The release reportedly went to the paper closest to palace circles and separately to the Daily Mail, notably absent from that carefully curated distribution list. The one publication that recently defeated Prince Harry decisively in court. The specific outlet he reportedly owes a fairly substantial legal settlement to following that ruling. According to Jobson, that particular omission was not remotely coincidental, and it is difficult to disagree once the timing and stakes for everyone involved are considered. Someone compiled a list carefully. Someone deliberately excluded one specific name from it. This was not news breaking organically. This was a managed release, and the recipient list alone demonstrates as much. The underlying transaction is not subtle in the slightest, once the pattern is traced carefully. Favorable coverage now reportedly purchases priority access to everything later. First photographs the moment that aircraft touches down. First public appearance afterward. Every subsequent milestone moment worth capturing. Those specific images carry genuine, substantial commercial value to whichever outlet secures them first, which explains why coverage warms noticeably in advance, with nobody involved particularly eager to explain the mechanics out loud to their own readers. Cease describing any of this as news simply breaking on its own. Nothing broke organically here. Something was carefully placed, with one specific outlet pointedly excluded from the arrangement. The same outlet that had just finished prevailing over this family thoroughly in a courtroom weeks earlier. Draw whatever conclusion feels most appropriate from that particular detail. The conclusion has already been drawn here, and you have likely drawn yours as well by this point in the account. What actually occurs once this relocation is complete? Kelvin Mackenzie ran the Sun for 13 consecutive years, long enough to develop a properly acute instinct for exactly how British public sentiment shifts once patience genuinely runs dry with a particular public figure. His forecast arrived without substantial hedging or diplomatic softening around the edges. Genuine, tangible risk of public booing somewhere specific, sometime soon after arrival. Alison Pearson raised the question nobody satisfactorily answered across a full 6 years of intensive coverage, who specifically, actively wants this couple's return to British shores, followed immediately by the sharper version of that same question, whatever became of Britain being the racist, toxic country she supposedly could not survive inhabiting a moment longer? That particular question has gone unanswered consistently through every available opportunity across 6 years to address it directly and candidly. The version that should genuinely follow them through arrivals at the airport, whether they are prepared for it or not, if everything stated then was accurate and true. Returning here voluntarily with your own young children in tow appears reckless in the extreme, bordering on irresponsible parenting. If it was not accurate, the entire foundational narrative that funded 6 years of content simply collapses under its own weight. Either the danger was authentically real and this specific decision is profoundly irresponsible given what they claimed, or the danger was manufactured from the beginning purely for commercial purposes. Jobson believes the monarchy risks appearing properly chaotic without noticeably firmer management going forward from this point. Remarkably, on the exact night this story broke publicly, one commentator suggested on live national television that Prince William should reportedly be bypassed entirely in favor of Prince Harry ascending instead. Henry V, she apparently termed it, delivered with what sounded like complete sincerity rather than obvious irony. One person's fantasy scenario, certainly nothing more substantial than idle speculation, but it broadcast on national television within hours of the announcement landing, which communicates something meaningful about the current atmosphere, regardless of how seriously anyone in that studio actually received the suggestion at the time. Returning to where this began, why now specifically? Not primarily the finances, though those are reportedly running thin behind closed doors. Not exclusively King Charles's health either, whatever version gets carefully briefed to American outlets by their team. The actual driving force is timing itself, plainly stated. King Charles approves requests Prince William would refuse outright without hesitation. The moment Prince William actually holds the crown himself, every current arrangement, titles, privileges, whatever informal access currently exists through King Charles's goodwill disappears the instant he assumes the throne. The window had to open now specifically, while the more permissive king still occupies the position rather than his considerably less accommodating son. That is reportedly why this arrived through a brief telephone call rather than an actual sustained face-to-face discussion between father and son. This was never fundamentally about a son quietly missing his father's presence. It is about a brother carefully tracking a steadily narrowing window of institutional opportunity before it closes permanently, and moving decisively while that window still remained open to him. Draw your own conclusions from that timing, but do not term it a homecoming. Nobody arrives home 4 weeks after informing their own father of essentially nothing beforehand. That is not reconciliation. That is a deadline with a flight number attached to it. You already understand what the public verdict was that night without requiring it spelled out further. Of every comment posted, one line rose consistently above everything else. 3 words: William, stand strong. He will require every measure of it. What is your assessment? Is this actually about a father wanting additional time with grandchildren before circumstances prevent it? Or is the timing simply too convenient to constitute anything except calculation? If you were Prince William watching your brother relocate without so much as a telephone call first, could you actually stand strong the way that comment section is demanding? Or would something eventually have to give? Your candid assessment belongs in the comments. Every single one gets read. If breakdowns of this nature are what you come here for, subscribe to Heritage Insider so you do not miss the next one. Drop a like on your way out if tonight's account kept you watching to the end.